Hello, everyone, and welcome into the CardsHQ podcast. I am Jeff Greer of the Courier-Journal, U of L basketball writer, and we are going to have a lengthy catch-up session today with Steve Jones, our U of L football writer, my buddy. We're going to be talking about all sorts of different things, well, primarily the spring game, spring football game, but also touch on a few other items that happened over the weekend, Kentucky Derby Festival Classic, and the roles that the 4 Louisville basketball signees may have. We'll also talk about the Papa John comments from last week's Board of Trustees meeting. There's been plenty going on at U of L here for the past few days. But before we get to my conversation with Steve and the majority of, which is an hour, we talk about a lot of different things. I did just want to put out a friendly reminder. If you want to be a regular subscriber of this podcast, it's really, really easy. Really easy. You can download the CardsHQ app, and I mentioned this at the end of talking with Steve too, but download the CardsHQ app. That has everything that you need as a U of L fan or a sports fan who's just interested to see what people are saying about Louisville. If that's your bag, cool. Everything you need, stories, analysis, photos, videos, this podcast, all sorts of stuff. Also, find us on iTunes, CardsHQ, subscribe there. That'll send it directly to whatever kind of Apple product you have where you store podcasts. Every time I upload this thing online, it will be sent to your iTunes and then to your phones or iPads or whatever. You can also find us on SoundCloud, CardsHQ, and make sure you like our Facebook page, the CardsHQ Facebook page. That's where we share a lot of stuff. Our web producers run that page. They do a good job of it, posting photos and links and all sorts of stuff. So there's so many different ways to connect with us, and obviously we're trying really hard to get this stuff out to as many people as possible. So that you can enter the discussion and be part of the larger conversation about U of L sports. So here's my conversation with Steve Jones, and we'll probably be doing a lot more of these here as the summer kicks in and we run out of actual games to talk about. So Steve, spring football is behind you. You can spend time with your family, we would think, and start to catch up on our lives after the school year. Baseball obviously is still going, but you were at a bunch of the spring practices. You went to the spring game as of our recording. It was a couple days ago on Saturday. Just, I guess, first of all, your kind of general thoughts about what you saw transpire on Saturday, and we can go into more specifics from there.
Well, they had tried to change it around this year by formatting it by splitting up the starters. Every year since Bobby's been there, they've done the first team offense and first team defense versus the second team. So that's how you got these just hugely lopsided scores. There's 73-7 last year because it's all the starters going against all the backups. Mm-hmm. This year they really divvied him up almost half and half. But I think, as we learned, not all starters are created equal. Just because you're a starter, and the team that had Lamar Jackson and the team that seemed to have more of the better weapons on offense just ended up dominating anyway. So it was about similar. It was 52-7 was the score, and it was pretty similar to all the other ones. And you'd probably be like, it's just random, meaningless spring game score. But really, it was against the team that half of which are guys that will start for Louisville next year. Stacey Thomas, James Hearns. Not that those guys played bad or anything. They actually were good. But it was a legitimate defense they were playing against. Tremaine Washington will be a starting cornerback. And I think Zach Cannon was on the team. So there were 5 or 6 guys that'll be starters on the defense next year. But Lamar was fantastic, and Des Fitzpatrick, who redshirted last year, and really that we haven't seen in a game situation before, was fantastic. And you left coming away thinking that their offense is going to be great. Lamar was, what was he? He was 17 of, let me see, I'm looking at the stat sheet right now. He was 19 of 32 for 346, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked once. The one real actual time he did a running play, he ran for a 34-yard touchdown. Other than that, he really didn't do any running at all. And that was all in about 2.5 quarters that he threw for that much yards. And, he made some throws. Again, every time, from a guy who's seen him now several times in these practice settings, in addition to the many games he's played, he makes some throws that are just incredible to me. Really, I still feel like he's underrated as a passer. I think people think he's overrated as a passer, or not that good, or doesn't have an NFL future as a passer. And I can't understand that line of thinking, because he makes 2 or 3 throws a game that you're just that I wonder if 5 or 10 quarterbacks in the NFL could make. He made one where he was on the right hash, his own team's 35 or 40-yard line, threw it back on the opposite left sideline to Fitzpatrick at the opposing team's 35. So it was like a 25-yard gain that went 38 yards in the air and was just a rope. He threw it Fitzpatrick jumped up and caught it about 8.5 feet in the air. I mean, just an amazing throw, and great catch too by a really, really good young receiver, it appears. He had a fade pass to Fitzpatrick that was a front left corner of the pylon, and was just again just a perfectly placed ball, and Fitzpatrick made a great leap and timing to catch it. And Lamar was great. They had set out this spring to try and have him work more under center, which he did in this game. Straight dropbacks. He still did plenty of stuff from the shotgun, which he will during the season. He had attempted to not. Bobby had wanted him to make better decisions about when to throw the ball away and not take a sack, because he obviously did that many times last year. Yeah. He got sacked once. It's a game where you're not allowed to be sacked. But I think the one time he was sacked, I don't even remember that was a play that it seemed like they whistled that dead kind of quickly. I don't remember exactly which play that was. But, according to Bobby, he didn't mess up in that way at all. He was good with the ball. And, he's never been a guy that's thrown interceptions. I guess the thing with him will be if he gets better at, short passes, like 6 to 7 yard passes, things out to the flat, out to the running backs. That's never been something they've really done very much, even though they always kind of say it's a priority. He did have one really, really nice sort of just routine swing pass to Bonifant out the sideline. He went for 7 yards. So I think that, if you came away thinking at all like this guy isn't going to be a legitimate Heisman candidate again, it's almost like someone are kind of writing him off. I'm like, he's awesome. He was really, really awesome. And I think that the fact that he threw for that many yards against what was a legitimate defense was pretty impressive. Des Fitzpatrick was the revelation, I guess, or the breakout star of the game. He had 9 catches for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had the one great catch that I said, the fade pass touchdown over True Washington. He also had this 80-yard touchdown that was just like a bob and weave, open field running, catch and run that he had for a long touchdown that he got a ton of yards on. But he also made a whole bunch of little intermediate catches of 12 yards and 9 yards and stuff on just crossing routes where he just beat his man and caught a step and was open. Lamar delivered it to him. He drew a pass interference on True Washington. He really got the better of True Washington when those guys matched up. And he was great, you know. And one thing that you actually took away from that was like, okay, obviously this guy is going to be a player for him, which isn't surprising. He was their top-ranked recruit last year. But they can put him at receiver, and that means that they're able to move Reggie Bonifant away from receiver if they need to and put him at running back. You know, Fitzpatrick shows that they have enough bodies at receiver that it wouldn't hurt them too bad to move Reggie if they need to. And Reggie played the entire game he only played a quarter and a half because he got hurt himself, had a minor ankle tweak. But Reggie played the game at running back because they have so few players available in the game. They only had one other scholarship running back available. So if you need to have Reggie play running back, they still are going to have Dez. They're still going to have Seth Dawkins. Jaylon Smith will be back. He was out this spring, but he'll be back. You know, Travion Samuel, Wakefield. I don't know how much Wakefield will play, but you know he's another option there at the slot.
Yeah. Well, and I always thought Jaylon Smith was would be, and I know Seth Dawkins had a good spring, but I always thought toward the end of the season that Jaylon Smith would be a guy, and sounds like Des Fitzpatrick is in this category too, that would make a lot of like big plays for them downfield. Because he did do that, at times. I don't know, he didn't have a ton of catches last year, but it seemed like every time he did have a catch, it was some sort of a big moment that he would come up for them.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, Jaylon Smith he's bona fide. You know, I mean, I think as you said, I think he had like 35 catches for like 600 yards or something. I mean, he averaged over 20 yards a catch, I think. He'll be great. You know, he's only a junior, and he should really break on, I think, to the national scene or the ACC scene at least this year. But yeah, I mean, they have really good receivers when you factor in Jaylon Smith coming back, and I think it gives you a different dimension to put Reggie back there at running back because he is really fast. Day Williams is out at least until near the end of the season with an ACL, probably for the entire season. Jeremy Smith, what I've heard is he has a foot injury that's not severe, and he'll be back by early summer or midsummer, and he'll be back definitely in time for fall camp. But Malik Williams also is another guy who was limited all spring, but he should be back fine. I think he had an ACL or a broken leg or something in the Houston game, and has now come back. 5 months later, and is okay and will be fine in the coming weeks. So they'll get guys back. They also have Colin Wilson, the 4-star recruit that they signed. So they'll have bodies back there at running back. But if they want to have more depth, Reggie would be the fastest and most athletic of those guys. He's 210 pounds, so he's a legitimate big guy, although he looks kind of like a lanky, tall guy to be a running back. But, I thought Reggie was pretty good in the spring game. He had one really, really good run for like 19 yards, cutback run, but then got hurt and he went out. So, again, they'll have a lot of weapons on offense. And I think, and we didn't even see Lamar run in this game, and Lamar still is going to be he's so amazing at it that they'll be scary. They'll have a scary offense again. And the caveat, the qualifier, the problem, the concern, the question mark is the offensive line always.
Every year.
It's the same as what I said last year, though. They can't get any worse. If they only get marginally better, then they'll be much better. Now, as it was, they got no better. They were no better. They ended up, as far as sacks, they were 0% better. They gave up like exactly the same amount of sacks as they gave up last year, and were completely outmanned against some of the other, bigger, more athletic defensive fronts they saw. But if Jaron Christian can be a little bit better, more improved, kind of get more in the body of an NFL kind of guy. Same with McNeil, who they've moved back out to tackle. They played him a lot of guard, but apparently they're going to move him out to tackle. Then they have a whole lot of, Kenny Thomas is a good player, a legitimate player. I think that we all agree can be a nice player as one of the guards. they've moved Cole Bentley, the all-state 4-star recruit from Belfry, the true freshman who just enrolled mid-year. By the end of spring, and in the spring game, he was running with the first team. So he'll start probably fall camp as a number 1 guard. And redshirt freshman Robbie Bell probably will end up being the center. Between Kenny Thomas, Cole Bentley, and Robbie Bell, I think there are mistakes that will be made based on inexperience. But I think talent-wise, they're all probably an upgrade over the guys they're replacing. You know, they just have a little bit more pedigree, a little bit more recruiting pedigree, and then they're also going to add 4 additional 4-star recruits. You know, it's always hard for an offensive lineman to come in and start right away, but they'll have some really big guys. One JUCO guy named Ronald Rudd, who should be able to play right away if they need him to. So I think there's some optimism there, especially with Mike Summers coming along, that they will be better. And if they're only somewhat better, you know, that's a great proposition for them.
So I had a handful of questions for you and touched on the offensive line and running backs. The thing that has been interesting in this offseason, from, you know, obviously from the vantage point of almost entirely 98% of my time is spent on basketball, you know, it's interesting how Louisville is obviously returning the Heisman Trophy winner and has, as we were talking about, a bunch of very talented young receivers that, all those guys you mentioned, I would think would be viable playmaking options for them in the fall. And there is plenty of talent coming back on the defensive side of things. You mentioned Stacey Thomas and James Hearns, Jair Alexander. There are some good players. And they also, as football teams tend to do, especially good football teams, they lost a bunch of guys who were really good and productive college players like Keith Kelsey and a whole group of them, D'Angelo Brown. How much do you think that this will be... If Lamar Jackson didn't exist, this would almost be entirely a transition year, wouldn't you think? Like with all of the young guys that they have recruited coming up and being freshmen and sophomores now, redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores, and a couple of guys who are still around from this past team. But Lamar is so talented that he can cover up some of those maybe growing pains that exist.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you return the Heisman winner, you go or have to replace the Heisman winner, the outlook on the entire team changes. But I mean, with him back, you would think that they'll be as good as they were last year. If they didn't, you would think they probably wouldn't be as good. So I think that, but it is a very experienced team. They do lose a lot. Quick and Staples were very experienced guys and productive players. The 4 defensive guys that are moving on and will have a chance, if not to get drafted, then at least to make a team, have moved on. And I think Hicatini and Tobridge are the 2 losses that are really underrated, in my opinion, and Radcliffe as well. But, I feel like all those guys are replaceable. I think the wide receivers definitely are replaceable. The tight ends, I think, are that is, like, as I mentioned, a tough spot for them to replace. But, Lamar is going to be, I think, is going to be fantastic again. I mean, he's by having him, you're almost locked in already to have a Heisman finalist. I mean, if you have one of those, that's an amazing accomplishment. And he is in position, even if he doesn't win the Heisman, he probably will have the 2nd or 3rd greatest season in the history of the school. And if they should be a really good team that should contend in all their games. Clemson obviously is going to take a little bit of a step back. I mean, they still always recruit great, but I mean, they lost just a ton. Deshaun Watson, Mike Williams, Leggett, Gallman. the Tankersley, the guys that some of the defensive front that they have.
Mm-hmm.
But, they obviously always plug those gaps with another great group of recruits. But I think the skill level that they lost on offense is a lot. And Louisville gets them at home. And, that would be a chance for Louisville to break through. If they're not going to do it this year, I don't know when they are. This would be the year. If they're ever going to break through against Clemson, this would be the year. Well, 2 years ago, I guess, would have been the year. 3 years ago, Bobby's first year, where they lost the game on the goal.
Yeah, they had a chance. Yeah.
Well, 2 years ago they did too. They had a field goal in fourth quarter to tie the score, take the lead. I can't remember, but they've had you. Well, last year too. Last year.
Yeah, they've always been right there with them, and the interesting thing was everybody was wondering with Florida State. They broke through against Florida State in a very big way, and people I think were wondering if this, if they did it against Clemson in the same year. Obviously, what we saw at the end of the season, that kind of fell apart, but I do wonder what it would be like if they had gone into the Houston game and the Kentucky game without any losses, if that would have been any different. But, it's just every year until it happens, it's always going to be, can they beat both of these teams? Because whoever does that is usually the ACC's best team. But the way that the Coastal has shaped up now, it looks like, you're going to have to win both of those games and a really, really tough ACC championship game at this point because, Virginia Tech and Miami have obviously made coaching changes, and I think they're a lot more formidable going forward. So, the ACC has gotten a lot better with Louisville moving up into this newer echelon, I would say, in the last – Lamar moves them into that category, and the other side of the conference got a lot better.
Yeah, I think, those specific cases, Virginia Tech did lose a lot. I'm not an expert on their roster, but I know they did lose a lot, and I think that they probably are, it's possible they could take a step back. Miami could take a step forward, although they, I'm not, that would be a team that I think obviously is going to be pretty formidable. North Carolina lost a lot. Of course, Louisville plays them second game. That's their first game of the year, and that'll be interesting. But they have a ton to replace, namely Trubinsky. I still think the ACC Atlantic is really the key, and if for some reason Louisville can get out of there, having beaten Florida State and Clemson, then they're going to be in the top 5 of the playoff rankings. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this, and
Florida State could be preseason number 1. Number 1.
Yeah, they're going to be
they're going to be
really good.
That's going to be a monster challenge, and one probably, frankly, they will be a considerable underdog. I would think a 10-point underdog or something right now.
Yeah. So let's wrap the spring conversation with this. You've got it's the middle of April here. So we've got 4 months, about 3.5 months until training camp starts or preseason practices start, and about 4.5 months until games start. What do you think in your mind has to absolutely be better for Louisville, or get better over these next few months for them to be either on par or even slightly better than they were last year?
Yeah, the sack reductions, negative play reductions. It's really, that's it. That was, if you look at the games they lost, Clemson.
You don't hear too often about sack reduction, Steve.
I didn't even occur to me
Anyway, the offensive line.
I'm trying to think of how much I should go off on a tangent.
Don't. Just, I already made it bad. Just keep talking about the offensive line.
Titus,
just talk about the offensive line.
Procedures. Yeah, sack reduction will be key. If you look at the games that they lost, the Clemson, Houston, and LSU games, that killed them. That was just those were the three most dynamic offensive line or defensive lines that they faced. And whether that was some of Lamar's doing, that he held the ball too long, or whether that was some of the unique challenges of blocking for Lamar, who's always looking to make a play and improvises and does what he does behind the line. Also, or if it was just a lack of execution talent on the offensive line, that has to come down. And if it does, if you go from somehow 45 sacks to 30, I mean, it's not like that would make them any kind of an elite offensive line, but that would make them somewhat respectable. I think that is one or two games that they may win that they didn't win last year. Penalties. Again, a lot of those were on the offensive line. Pre-snap penalties, holdings need to come down, and fumbles. It was so amazing to see that Louisville had this offense that was among the greatest in the country the entire year. I mean, for the most part, they led the country and right there with Texas Tech in scoring and total yards and all that kind of stuff. But then they were at the bottom of the country in sacks, penalties, and fumbles. I mean, like the very bottom, like somehow was first in all those categories and then last in all those categories. So they need to fumble less. I mean, that also was a killer for them. Definitely the Houston game, that was a killer. The Kentucky game, that was a killer. But those are the things, I guess, that they need to get a little better at. I think the defense will be really good. I'm really high on the defense. I like the defensive front a lot. I think Drew Bailey's going to have a big year. I think Hearns is really tough. Chris Williams is a guy I think will come through and take a big step forward and make a lot of plays for him. And just couldn't be more bullish on like Jair Alexander. He's so physical and he's fast, and this, I wonder in some ways maybe he is as good or better an NFL prospect as Lamar at this point, because he, I don't know what other cornerback you would want. He is excellent, and could have a chance to come out early next year. And Chucky Williams and Stacey Thomas, and they have a good Trayvon Young should be back, and he looked great. Sturgill was back, and he looked great this spring. And they're going to add a bunch of talented DBs. Again, you wonder how much you can get out of true freshmen, but they've added a bunch there too. In the future, they're going to have a lot of issues with their defense of depth, because they are going to lose a lot after this year. I mean, you think about talking about the losses they've had after 2016 with Kelsey and Brown and Fields and Harvey Clemens. I mean, that's nothing compared to next year. All of those guys that I just mentioned, if you count Jair as a possible draft pick, will be gone. In addition to Cannon and Tremaine Washington and basically 8 or 9 starters are going to be seniors or possible early draft picks, and that's a big cause for concern. But that's for 2018. So in 2017, I think the defense will be really good. They have played. Basically, I'll just give a very brief kind of description of it. They've played basically a 3-4. It looks a lot like Grantham's defense. I guess you would call it maybe a 3-3-5 if you wanted to, because one of the spots is called the star spot, which is essentially the same thing Harvey Clemens played.
Yeah, right.
It's technically called an outside linebacker, I think. I mean, that's what the position is, but all of those guys are listed as safeties on the roster. It's guys like C.J. Avery, the very, very, very good, mature, strong, big, true freshman who enrolled mid-year and has already gotten first-team reps. Kane Pass and Lamarquez Thomas. Those guys, so they have these 3 big down defensive linemen. They have Hearns come in as an edge rusher. And then they have that opposite, they called him the field star outside linebacker that can pretty much, just play to play, alternate between being a linebacker or covering a slide or coming on a blitz or laying back in zone coverage. And they have that flexibility to go against a team that's showing either 3 or 4 or 5 wides or whatever, and get calls in quick. And I think between Hearns, not Fields, he's gone. Between Hearns, Bailey, Chris Williams, and Trayvon Young, assuming he can come back, DeAsian Richardson's the other guy, I think they can get a good push of 4 guys, with 4 or 5 guys, and not have to bring a lot of different blitzes and complex stuff, and play teams straight up and get lined up. And I think that's what Bobby was wanting with this change they made to Peter Sermon. Get guys lined up, get them in spots, make them be flexible to no matter what the defense plays, and get a good pass rush with only 4 guys. I think that is I think that's maybe the goal of the defense, and they seem pretty well equipped to do that.
When you said that's the future, in the future, I couldn't stop thinking about. Remember, I don't know if he still does it, but you remember when Conan would do the "In the year 2000"?
Yeah.
Remember that? We should do a whole podcast of just that with Louisville sports predictions. What do you think?
Yeah, we should do that.
maybe in like June when we have nothing else to do.
Talk about sack reduction. Speaking of, as we do this podcast, I was listening to some sports talk radio.
Terrible decision.
Well, you were on Marcus Maven's show, so it was telling. But I heard Marcus was also talking about, and I heard another station show was talking about that UK had these bowl rings that they had given out that showed the Governor's Cup. And I wanted to make a mention because I don't know where else I'll say it. I'm almost for sure that Louisville also has bowl rings for a bowl game that they lost. I'm almost certain that they got them. I just think the teams get them every year, right? I mean, I don't know that that's a big deal.
Just they publicized it, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think Louisville has tweeted out a thing about it, but I don't know that that's something that you need to razz UK about on this one. I think everybody gets bowl rings.
Everybody. I've determined that people here are valuable readers, and they pay attention to stuff. And obviously, we wouldn't be able to do what we do if people weren't so dedicated to this. But at the same time, I think there's a smaller group of people who probably need to find another hobby, because the vitriol that has consumed. I was talking with one of the Louisville signees the other day. I can't remember which one. And I was just saying, I moved here from Rhode Island. I know you grew up here, Steve, in Kentucky, and I grew up in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and will admit first and foremost that I have said some particularly mean things about members of the New York Yankees, members of the Indianapolis Colts and Pittsburgh Steelers over the years, et cetera, but all in passing, not consuming. This rivalry and the way people snipe at each other and their players and their figures year round, and you've got radio hosts defending athletic directors, going out of their way to defend people involved with their favorite program. And I mean, it's unbelievable the lengths that people go to fuel this rivalry year round. It just always boggles my mind that people care this much about one other school, and that it consumes so much of their radio time and their Twitter time and their message board time. It just boggles my mind.
Well, I saw that the one, which I'm sure this was a topic you were going to bring up on the podcast. Well, I mean, at least the Derby Festival recruits obviously was going to be a topic you were going to bring up on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Was, I guess, this, I'm not sure if I saw that he saw a firm attribution to where he said it, but I know it was a tweet that Darius Perry had kind of taken a little shot at Isaiah Briscoe's foul shooting.
Apparently, I couldn't find. He never said that during media interviews on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Apparently, he said it on a podcast that I was literally just when I found out that he actually said something along those lines. That he said it on a podcast, I guess a UK/U of L podcast. The way that that it was presented to me about what he said was more about how Donovan Mitchell has developed than necessarily taking a shot at UK. But he said Briscoe still can't shoot or something like that, something along those lines.
He came to Louisville. He came to Kentucky and he couldn't shoot, and he's leaving Kentucky and he can't shoot.
Right,
or something.
Which
true
is an accurate now. To you can't extrapolate that and say, Calipari doesn't develop players. I think that's a ridiculous argument that Louisville fans make, and I think it's a ridiculous argument that Kentucky players make that Louisville doesn't develop players. Gorgui Dieng is now a regular starter in the NBA who plays a ton of minutes and had played, 2 years of basketball before he got to Louisville. So, you can come up with examples from both programs of guys who came in and developed and left, and, Willie Cauley-Stein for Kentucky, Montrezl Harrell. Terry Rozier, the development is there. So I think it's a ridiculous debate over a comment that individually is true about Briscoe.
Yeah, I think it's just an example of the way that people latch on to something in this rivalry and go nuts over it. I do think that it's will maybe add a little bit of intrigue, I guess, when that game comes around to what he hears, because that game will be in Rupp this next year, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Of course, we don't know exactly what Perry's role will be. He'll probably be 15-minute, 20-minute guy.
I would actually,
off the bench kind of guy.
Yeah, he seems like a guy who will play maybe right off the bat. I think he might play the most minutes out of all of the freshmen, just because they need him to play a fair amount of minutes because. You've really only got 3 true guards on the roster, and one of them might stay in the NBA draft, and one of them is Ryan McMahon. So you need a guy who can be a lockdown defender, and be a solid, confident, mature contributor, and he is exactly that. I already think I like Tony Hicks, but I think Darius Perry is already better than Tony Hicks, and he's 5 years younger than him. So I would think that he'll play quite a bit, but I would guess your numbers are probably accurate, like 15 to 20 minutes.
Well, I think it'll be pretty interesting to see because that I don't know. Do you have any sense? I know you've leaned 52-48 that Mitchell would stay in the draft.
Yeah, I think he's going to stay, and my argument is the NBA guys every NBA guy that I have talked to says that he's not going to. They want him to be point guard, and he's not going to play point guard at Louisville. That's just not. If he comes back to school, what can he truly really improve on that he wouldn't improve on playing? In the NBA or NBDL. He's not going to be a point guard at Louisville. Quentin Snyder is still there. He's going to play 30 minutes, and Darius Perry is going to take up the rest of the time. His shooting already improved. He can work on that all day, every day if he's a pro. So I think they all are kind of like, well, what is the point of him coming back? And when, as you know too, Steve, from talking to him over the years, even when he was in high school, Donovan is going to be a very impressive interview with NBA teams. They're going to think they're going to be very impressed by him. And when you pair that with the fact that he's got a good build, he's 6'3", super long arms, and his athleticism is through the roof. I I think when you have those attributes as your foundation, then somebody's going to like him. I think he'll get picked in the first round, and I think he'll get picked in the top 20. I could be wrong. I'll happily admit it, or come clean if I am wrong. But I just think when you combine all of those things with a really competitive spirit, it's just hard for me to imagine him coming back. So the flip side is he loves college. He's really close with Deng Adele and Quentin Snyder and Jaylon Johnson. You can tell that he really cares about Louisville. I mean, you've probably seen him at he goes to all sorts of sporting events. He loves going to baseball games and women's basketball games, volleyball, football. He's the most visible. I would say he's probably the most visible U of L athlete locally. In terms of like showing up to events and stuff around here. I mean, he's everywhere. So that, paired with the fact that he is not a kid who is in dire financial straits with his family, could be a factor. Maybe he does want to come back, especially the way that they ended the tournament. Maybe he does want to come back and try to win a national championship. But from the NBA side of things, I think that they're going to be pretty upfront with him and just tell him, look, there's no reason for you to go back. And I guess it's just a matter of whose advice he takes and what matters the most to him.
I still kind of go back. He said that he pushed this all to the side, and I'm sure that he did. But, that he sort of admitted, and you've talked to his mom about it, was that they saw all these mock drafts and things mid-season. A lot of it was when he was playing point guards, when he really had his surgeon. Yes, a surgeon's is not a word. His surge, where he was great. That sort of stretch of whatever 10 or 12 games that he was the primary ball handler, and he's hitting all those threes and all that stuff. And he became sort of a unanimous, I guess, kind of top 25 prospect, if not top 20. And that his mom was getting all excited about it and kept showing him the articles and all that stuff like that. I don't think any of that affected his play. And he did, he said, I don't want to read any of that, Mom. Don't show that to me. But the fact that even that his family was getting that excited about it.
Right.
And that's pretty much about where he remains, right? He hasn't dropped or fallen from any point other during the season when he was playing at his best. I think maybe shows you like they're happy with that. That is great, Top 20 pick, that's awesome,
Yeah.
And I think I wonder if that's a little bit of a signal that maybe they're satisfied with being a top 25 or something like that kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I agree that when you talked to him and he said that about his mom, that caught my eye. That. And she, and when I talked to her again in March, and she said, we're going to go through all of the conversation and we're really going to talk about all of the highs and lows and pros and cons and all of that stuff, and sort of said, she was just kind of being a mom. I still think that it is. I mean, it is something that stuck out to me was how excited they were. Like you said. I mean, to me, it just seems like they, once you get that in your mind, it's hard to, hard to change that mentality, I think.
Yeah. No, I think it. He has been. If you're basing all on mock drafts, which I know Rick seems to take almost zero stock in the quality of mock drafts, but they've been pretty consistent with it. He seems to be a top 20-ish guy, and I think some places have had him at 13, 12, somewhere like that, right?
The highest I've seen is 16, but all in that general area, yeah.
Fringe lottery, or
right.
A little bit outside the lottery. That's pretty good. The one thing that I would wonder is just that there are so many point guards in the draft how many teams need a point guard, really? That they would go with a first. After the first like 5 or 6 of those elite freshman guys go, are there still? There probably is a team somewhere picking between like 15 and 25 that needs a point guard, but there are a lot of good point guards in the NBA right now. Teams that that are happy with their point guard and have bigger needs somewhere else. Definitely, I think that's the case with a lot of the playoff teams.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a little bit of a concern I would have if I were Donovan, but we'll see. I do think that it would be interesting to see. Like, I think Quentin Snyder's an excellent player. I think it would be interesting to see if Rick just kind of flipped that on its head and made Quentin the guy who played primarily off the ball, and had Donovan play primarily point guard. How that would work out, because Quentin is really good off the pick and roll, and he made a lot of plays, with some of the big men in that way. But he also is a really good spot up shooter, and that's almost that's having him play out on the wing would probably be, and make Donovan more of the creator, would also be a pretty successful way to go, I would think.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, and they have the thing that Darius Perry, gives them that those 3 guys plus VJ King, Deng Adele, and Jordan Nwora, all give them different options. And you could throw Ryan McMahon in there too because of his shooting ability, but all of those guys, I mean, I just named you 7 guys, so that gives them options that they can mix and match with those things, and I do think that Rick has said in the past, I do think that that's an interesting thought, Steve, because Rick has said in the past, Donovan is things tend to happen when Donovan has the ball in his hands. So maybe they do try to do that a little bit more. But I think Donovan, at his best case scenario, is following the Terry Rozier track, where he was a lead guard, not quite the point guard, but a lead guard for Louisville. Worked his butt off at playing point guard for a couple months, and then worked his way into the top 20 in the draft. Because of good interviews, good athleticism, a lot of work and good workouts for teams, and rises up the ranks. And I think Donovan is surely capable of doing that.
And the one other thing that I was wanting to mention on the podcast, and I'll let you take over and have your discussion of the basketball recruits, is I guess we have not had a podcast opportunity to discuss the Papa John comments from last week. For anyone who hasn't heard, which I'm sure anyone around here has heard, the Papa John's gave Papa John Schnatter, the CEO of Papa John's and the longtime U of L booster, who's now a member of the U of L Board of Trustees, gave a surprising sort of out of nowhere criticism of the Louisville athletic department and their leadership during a overall University of Louisville Board of Trustees meeting that kind of just was talking about that Tom Jurich is invisible to the Board of Trustees, and that the stadium is a priority that they shouldn't be working on with all the other university things, and it's part of this 3-legged stool that's off balance, and it needs to be fixed before the rest of the university can be fixed. Jeff, did you have any thoughts on that? I had one thought.
Well, I'll just say real fast. I mean, I think that I want to choose my words carefully here, because obviously you and I both report on all of this stuff and have to be able to continue to do that and be perceived as fair. So, which is our number one objective. I will just say I don't think it hurts Louisville, the university, to have someone or multiple people challenge Tom Jurich. The flip side of that is I think if you're going to do it, you should be willing to kind of answer to questions about what exactly it is that you're referring to. And I thought that's where the mark was sort of missed with that was, look, I mean,
absolutely.
You know,
I mean, you
like
gotta explain yourself if
right.
You're coming out that hot with the take.
Exactly. So it's just kind of like, you know, I think, look, you know, people will argue till they're I should say red in the face. I was going to say blue in the face because that's the saying, but I'll say red in the face. That, you know, nobody has done more for U of L than Tom Jurich, and I think that's a valid argument. You can make a very strong argument that he and James Ramsey have turned U of L into, you know, obviously a much different university than when they first got there. So there's no doubting the accomplishments that these men, you know, came up with. Now, it's okay to also challenge some of the stuff that is going on. I mean, there's no doubt that there is a basketball scandal going on. There's no doubt that, you know, there have been some other issues with the athletics department and the foundation and some of the money that has been moved around. Those are fair things to wonder about and talk about. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I mean, you can have critiques without it saying, you know, without them necessarily saying, you know, oh, you should be fired. I mean, I don't think it's not like they're attacking his track record. So I think that's something that Louisville's sports fan base really struggles with, is this inability to hear criticism and maybe work through it, because it's just impossible for them to let go of just the accomplishments. And so I just think it's going to be really important for whoever the president of the university is to know that they can be, you know, that they can have an open dialogue with athletics without it being perceived as some, like, you know, academics versus athletics attack. You know, I just feel like that's a bad environment for them to try to actually move forward and get things done.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I was going to say that I had heard, you know, as people were trying to parse what exactly Papa John was referring to, because he was so vague, was that really he was just trying to make a grander. He was just trying to make a point about sort of the nature of spending in the athletic department versus the amount of money that is either they're either struggling to find or with the cuts or the burden that's being placed on students who just attend the university. And I don't know that it was necessarily any kind of, although it maybe came across this way, that it wasn't attempting to really take a shot at Jurich per se, more so just the nature of athletic spending versus academic spending.
Right.
And I think that he probably didn't say it very well. And then he should have come out and explained himself afterward, I think, which he has not done. He has declined interviews and hasn't been available to talk ever since the meeting. So that's all pretty much anyone knows are the 4 or 5 comments that he said during this meeting. But what he had to say, I think, is a thought that's not, or is an opinion that isn't necessarily new, and I think that probably one that a lot of people recognize or agree with, is that the amount of emphasis that is placed on resources and spending for athletics at institutions of higher learning is a little bit out of whack, but. And that, you know, in U of L's case, Jurich maybe is a bit of is unchecked in what he's able to do, and he can spend just about however he wants. Now, of course, it's always important to mention that it is athletics' own money that they've risen for their own for their own purposes. I mean, it's not coming out of anyone's. It's not coming out of some academic building's pool of money. You know, it's coming out of money that they raised to build up their own stadium, and that they've with express intent that that's what they're coming for. So they really are in some ways apple to apple. It's maybe not apples to apples. It's probably also not completely apples to oranges because they are somewhat related. But, it's just a tough issue. It's just the way it is. It's the fact that athletic departments, football teams, college basketball teams are huge revenue-generating entities that make a ton of money. And there's not anything comparable on a university side that does that just thousands and thousands of people will flock to and pay tickets to see, and you can have tons and tons of money going to it. Right. So, and the athletics department uses it for their own purposes. So,
well, I'll never forget when Bobby was officially the guy that they wanted in early 2014. And Adam Himmelsbach and I were calling trustees members to ask them about this meeting that they were going to have where they had to approve the hire. And at least two of them that I spoke to, basically just started laughing when I actually asked, is there any way that this doesn't happen, that people vote against it? And they laughed because it was, do you really think that anyone at this university will stand up to Tom Jurich and say no? And that was 3 years ago. And I think that the stuff that happened with Ramsey has, not to like any sort of significant level, but it has chipped a little bit away from Tom in the sense of like, why is he getting deferred payment of millions and millions of dollars? Why is this being done in the dark? Some of these odd questions. And then obviously the basketball scandal has really caused a lot of anxiety and stress and bad publicity for U of L. The WikiLeaks thing was really poorly handled, at least the first way around. And the football shootings were really poorly handled. And, whether or not that's on the athletics director is subject to debate, but there's a reason why the president will get blamed for some State Department staffer doing something illegal. It's whoever's in charge is held responsible for things that happen on their watch. And so I do think that there has been some erosion to the invincibility of the athletics director at U of L. But I just think ultimately, again, as someone who is not from here, I've really, it's been fascinating coming in and learning about the dynamics here. Having come in from a different place and seen a lot of other athletics departments and how they operate in universities, I would just think that, you've got a state audit, you've got the FBI looking at you, you've got all sorts of lawsuits and bad stuff happening with accounting and all of these issues. I would just think if you were in any way, shape, or form a supporter or a fan or alum of a university, that you would just want everything to be on the table as far as critiques and open conversations and dialogue, and not turn it into this us versus them mentality. I would just, it just strikes me as kind of a counterintuitive, counterproductive response to the possibility that they might, put athletics in the discussion of things that maybe need some tweaks. But again, Papa John, the delivery, like you said, the delivery was not.
Papa John needs to improve his delivery.
Yes, that's yes. A little too. The box was a little too hot in which he delivered his flaming hot take at the Board of Trustees.
Well, it sort of was almost unnecessarily a shot at Jurich too. I don't know that
Right, because we don't know what his point was. We, nobody knows what the point is.
It seemed unfair to Jurich, personally, what he said. Bobby Petrino made a very forceful statement of support of Jurich the other day, unprompted, at his press conference. It was, I don't know. I don't know if Papa John did the best thing that the attention he was trying to bring to maybe a legitimate issue turned into a Papa John versus Jurich conversation. That's what it turned into.
Right.
And that's he ended up deflecting or away from the point he was really trying to make.
Exactly. Yep. And that is.
And as you said, fans don't want to hear Tom Jurich be criticized, and you immediately almost lose your credibility in what you're saying with fans, Louisville fans, because they hold Tom in such high regard, and rightly so for the most part.
Yeah, and it's just I've been very interested learning about a lot of people who are very much big U of L sports fans and not necessarily U of L supporters, if that makes sense, like university supporters. Now, you can't, not everybody, there's no one blanket group of people, but that does seem to be something that exists, is that there's a lot of people who are just U of L sports fans, and they look at the university and just say that place is a mess, but at least the sports teams are good.
Well, I mean, they have a lot of reputation building to do, and I think in the meantime, it's going to hamper some of their fundraising.
Yeah.
I mean, they have not presented themselves as good stewards of finances and contributions and tuition, while also very frequently asking for more tuition money.
Yep. But okay, man. Well,
that was all that I had to say about that, but didn't mean to go too long there. But I thought that was a good thing for us to mention. That was the big issue of the general of the athletic department.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I'm glad we had our chat. So guys, you can follow Steve if you don't already know this. You probably should. If you're listening to this podcast, you already. What's that? If you're listening to this, it's too late. If you're listening to this, you already know. But you can follow Steve at SteveJones_CJ. You can follow me at JeffGreer_CJ. And all of our stuff is on CourierJournal.com. And I say this all the time, Steve, and I know you say it too. Just download the CardsHQ app and you'll get everything in one place. I mean, it's literally like the easiest possible app. If you're a sports fan and a U of L fan, you go to that app every day. There's new content, there's videos, there's photo galleries, there's stats, there's schedules, there's podcasts, and then all of the analysis and news that Steve and I put out there. It's all in one place. So when you go there, you can find our podcast there. That's the best way to do it. But find us on iTunes as well, CardsHQ, and subscribe. It makes Steve and I look good to our lady friends. So, Steve, I guess we'll reconvene next week and have something else to talk about.
Yeah, I am hopefully going to take off for a few days. So I'm going to go to North Carolina for the weekend.
I'll be in Pittsburgh.
My lovely wife's and I are celebrating our 10th anniversary.
Oh, man. Okay, there you go. It's 10th anniversary, Steve. A new Steve is introduced into the realm here. I like it. I'm intrigued to see what the 10th anniversary Steve comes up with, if it's anything special.
I mean, I don't know. No surprises. I mean, we're going to spending a ridiculous amount of money at the hotel we're going to.
Are you going to Asheville or somewhere else?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right, man. Well, enjoy yourself, and we'll reconvene next week and probably have a bunch of other stuff to talk about, because that's how U of L operates.
Well, happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you. I'm getting old.
Not as old as me, my friend.
That's true.
But that's true. Yes, let's make sure that you feel good about yourself. But just always enjoy working with you, buddy, and have a good birthday celebration as much as you're able to have one.
All right, thanks, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right.